The cry for help. The galaxy had known peace for centuries, or so they thought. Wars were fought and won, civilizations rose and fell, but in the far corners of space, some powers dared to think of themselves as unstoppable. They had conquered worlds, crushed empires, and established their rule with an iron fist. But now, as a new threat emerged, even they were trembling. A desperate message echoed through the stars. It was faint, fragmented, but there was no mistaking its meaning. The galaxy was in danger, and the people who had sent it, worlds once proud and unyielding, were now pleading for help. On Earth, the message came through loud and clear. The United Council's emergency broadcast systems hummed to life, carrying the distress call from an unknown system. A battle was raging, and the inhabitants of a peaceful sector were facing annihilation. The message was clear. We need help. We need protection. Please, before it's too late. The council hall fell silent as the message ended. No one spoke immediately. The threat was unknown, but the plea was desperate. For the first time in centuries, one of the most powerful civilizations in the galaxy had asked for help. And then, Admiral Nathan Brooks, commander of Earth's defense fleet, stood up. "Prepare the warships," he said with a grim voice. "Humanity won't let this go unanswered." The room buzzed with activity. The fleet wasn't fully ready for a large-scale deployment, but this wasn't a time for waiting. Brooks knew that the galaxy needed to see Earth's response to this challenge. They needed to know what happened when humanity was pushed to the brink. Brooks' orders were swift. Within hours, Earth's most formidable warships were on their way to the coordinates of the distress signal. But this wasn't just about showing force. It was about sending a message. Humanity had been underestimated for too long, and now they were going to make their presence known. As the warships prepared to leave, Brooks stood on the observation deck of the flagship Victory. The stars stretched out before him, cold and indifferent. But Earth was different. They had the heart, the resilience, and the firepower to meet any challenge. Soon, the fleet was in motion, cutting through the silence of space with a purpose. The journey ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear. This wasn't just another conflict. It was a turning point for humanity. They would answer the call, not with words, but with firepower. The fleet's arrival wasn't unnoticed. The enemy, a massive force of machines and warlords, had been terrorizing peaceful systems for years, leaving no survivors in their wake. They had invaded countless worlds, demanding tribute and crushing those who refused. But this time, they weren't prepared for what was coming. Earth's warships arrived in a storm of fire and fury, far stronger than the invaders had anticipated. The sheer size and power of humanity's fleet overwhelmed them at first glance. The first salvo from Earth's warships lit up the dark expanse of space, sending shockwaves through the enemy ranks. The invaders had underestimated the speed and precision of the human fleet. It wasn't just a military response, it was a statement. They were no longer a distant, vulnerable species. They were a force to be reckoned with. On the bridge of the flagship Victory, Admiral Brooks watched the destruction unfold. His mind was focused, calculating. They had to win. There was no other option. The fate of countless innocent lives rested in their hands. As the battle raged on, the enemy commanders scrambled, realizing they had made a grave mistake. The same creatures they had once deemed weak and unworthy of notice had now turned the tide in their favor. Earth's response was a testament to what happened when humanity's back was against the wall. The enemy's forces were numerous, but they lacked the unity and heart that humanity possessed. Earth's fleet fought not just for survival, but for something more, the protection of their home and the future of the galaxy. In the midst of the chaos, Brooks made his final order. Increase the firepower. Show them what we're capable of. The warships opened fire, and the enemy forces began to crumble. Earth had answered the call for mercy, not with weakness, but with the full force of their firepower. But the war wasn't over. The enemy was on the brink of collapse, but there was still resistance. Will humanity's strength be enough to finish what had begun? And more importantly, what would the rest of the galaxy think when they learned what humanity had done? One thing was certain: the universe would never underestimate Earth again. The fleet's first wave had struck like a thunderclap, shattering the silence of the stars. Earth's warships, massive and imposing, tore through the invaders' defenses. But the battle was far from over. The enemy's forces regrouped quickly, their sheer numbers beginning to take a toll on humanity's fleet. Admiral Brooks stood at the command center of the flagship Victory, his eyes scanning the holographic battlefield. He could see the enemy ships scattering, trying to reorganize and retaliate. But what they didn't understand was the depth of humanity's resolve. Earth's forces were not just fighting for victory. They were fighting to protect everything they held dear. The communication channels were filled with urgent messages from Earth's fleet. Officers reported on the front lines, their voices steady but filled with the tension of battle. Some ships had already sustained damage, but the enemy hadn't expected the speed and precision with which Earth's fleet was striking back. Humanity's warships were agile, their weaponry deadly, and their strategy precise. They moved like a well-oiled machine, each fleet following the other in perfect coordination. Brooks issued his next order with a calm, commanding voice. "Send in the second wave. No mercy." As the order was relayed, a second wave of ships launched from the fleet. These ships were smaller, more nimble, designed for close combat and tactical strikes. They swooped in and out of the battle, weaving between enemy lines, delivering devastating blows to the invaders. The enemy's larger, slower ships were no match for the agility of the human fleet. But even as Earth's forces continued to push forward, the enemy wasn't giving up. They had their own secret weapon: massive war machines capable of decimating entire fleets with their powerful energy beams. And now, they were deploying them. Huge, glowing energy cannons appeared in the distance, their deadly beams lighting up the darkness of space as they aimed toward Earth's warships. "Brace for impact," Brooks shouted, his voice sharp. The entire command deck went into action as the Victory and the surrounding ships prepared to face the oncoming onslaught. The first energy blast hit one of the lead ships in the fleet. It exploded in a flash of light, debris scattering across the battlefield. Brooks' heart sank, but there was no time to mourn. Every second counted. The fleet had to keep moving. "Countermeasure systems. Activate," Brooks ordered. Within moments, Earth's ships deployed a series of defense shields and evasive maneuvers, blocking most of the incoming blasts. But the enemy was relentless. Each strike sent shockwaves through space, shaking the very foundations of the battle. Amidst the chaos, humanity's warships began to show their true strength. The Victory, now fully operational, unleashed its own weapons, a barrage of missiles and plasma charges that lit up the battlefield like a star being born. The massive warship turned the tide, forcing the invaders back once again. But the enemy wasn't retreating. They had one more card to play. Suddenly, a fleet of stealth ships appeared out of nowhere. These ships were nearly invisible, slipping through the gaps in Earth's defenses. They had been waiting for the right moment, and now they launched a devastating surprise attack. "All ships, prepare for a counterstrike," Brooks barked. The stealth ships may have been invisible, but Earth's warships were equipped with state-of-the-art tracking systems. In seconds, the Victory and its allies began to lock onto the hidden ships. With a roar, they fired, hitting the invisible ships with precision and destroying them one by one. But there were too many. The battle was escalating, and Earth's fleet was starting to feel the weight of the fight. "We need more support," Brooks muttered to himself. But as if on cue, Earth's reinforcements arrived. A massive fleet of smaller, faster warships, filled with eager soldiers, dropped out of hyperspace, bolstering the strength of humanity's forces. They weren't just soldiers. They were fighters, warriors who had trained for years for moments like this. As soon as they arrived, they began to engage the enemy head-on. The invaders were now facing a unified human front. Earth's fleet was unstoppable. The smaller ships quickly took control of the outer sectors of the battlefield, pushing the enemy forces back further and further. The energy cannons of the invaders fired wildly, but they were no match for the concentrated firepower of Earth's forces. With their morale shattered and their ranks dwindling, the invaders began to falter. The enemy fleet's command ship, their most formidable vessel, was spotted in the distance, the heart of their remaining forces. If they could take it down, the battle would be won. Brooks knew that the time to end this conflict had come. "Target the command ship," Brooks ordered. "All units, focus fire on that vessel. We end this now." Earth's fleet surged forward with everything they had. The invaders fought back fiercely, but they were losing. The command ship, once a symbol of their power, was now the target of a concentrated, unstoppable assault. And soon, the command ship erupted in a fiery explosion, the force of the blast sending shockwaves through space. The remaining invaders scattered, their once proud fleet in ruins. But the battle was far from over. The victory was significant, but Earth's fleet knew this was just the beginning of their true test. What would happen next? And how would the galaxy respond to this unexpected and overwhelming show of force from humanity? The warships had responded to the plea for mercy with firepower, but the question remained: would they be enough to ensure peace, or would the galaxy fall into a new era of conflict? Only time would tell. The explosion of the command ship sent shockwaves through the space battlefield, marking a decisive victory for humanity. However, the invaders were not entirely defeated. Their forces were retreating, but they were not running away. They were regrouping, preparing for one last desperate stand. This was their final chance to turn the tide, and they would fight to the death to protect their mission. Admiral Brooks knew this. He could feel the weight of the moment. While the first victory had brought a sense of hope, there was no time to celebrate. The invaders were ruthless, and their resolve was as strong as Earth's. This would be a battle to the bitter end. The fleet's communication systems buzzed with reports from every ship. Some had sustained heavy damage, but none had fallen. The human fleet's resilience was evident, yet even as they celebrated their victory, the war was far from over. Brooks paced in the command center, the glow of the stars outside the viewport reflecting on his tired face. His officers worked diligently, making repairs and sending out orders, but there was a sense of unease in the air. The invaders weren't running, they were just regrouping, and they were preparing for their final assault. "We can't afford to let them rebuild," said Captain Harris, one of Brooks' most trusted officers. "If we give them even a moment's peace, they'll come back stronger. We need to finish this now." Brooks nodded solemnly. "I know, but be ready. They're not done yet." Suddenly, the fleet's sensors went haywire. A new force was approaching, one even larger and more powerful than the last. The invaders had called in reinforcements, hundreds of ships, each heavily armed and ready for battle. Their final attack had begun. Brooks tightened his grip on the command chair. The battle was about to escalate to a level far beyond what Earth's fleet had already faced. The invaders had one last, desperate hope. But Brooks wasn't going to let that hope become a reality. "All ships, prepare for a defensive stance," he ordered. "We hold the line here. We're not going to let them overrun us again." Humanity's fleet quickly repositioned itself, forming a tight defensive perimeter around the remaining ships. The warships were lined up, weapons primed and shields at full power, ready for whatever the invaders could throw at them. The first wave of enemy ships came out of the darkness like a swarm of locusts. They had deployed new weapons, massive energy cannons that could slice through even the toughest of armor with ease. The fleet's shields held for now, but the pressure was mounting. Every hit caused the ships to shudder, their hulls groaning under the strain. "Brace for impact," Captain Harris shouted as the first energy blasts hit their shields. The blasts were powerful, but the human fleet's shields were even stronger. The ships buckled, but remained intact. Brooks watched closely, his mind racing. There was no room for error now. Humanity's fleet had to outlast this storm, but it wouldn't be easy. The invaders were relentless, using every trick in the book to break through the defenses. The skies filled with the flashing of weapons, the constant hum of shields being activated, and the roar of the warships charging forward. The enemy began deploying smaller strike craft, nimble fighters meant to take out Earth's warships from the inside. They darted in and out of the battle, harrying the human fleet with lightning-fast attacks. The small, agile ships were proving difficult to target, but Earth's warships fought back with deadly precision. Missiles launched from every direction, turning the space battlefield into a chaos of explosions and fire. "We need to take out their strike ships," Harris shouted, watching as one of their own warships was struck by an enemy fighter. Brooks nodded sharply. "Send in our interceptors. We won't let them tear us apart." Humanity's fleet launched a counteroffensive, sending out their own fleet of agile interceptors. These ships were designed to chase down fast-moving enemies and neutralize them before they could cause any serious damage. The two forces clashed in a frenzy of speed and firepower, their movements a blur as they dodged, attacked, and counterattacked. Brooks' fleet was holding, but barely. The invaders had thrown everything they had into this final assault, and humanity's fleet was starting to feel the pressure. Damage was mounting, and the invaders were pushing forward, their firepower nearly overwhelming Earth's defenses. Just as it seemed that the tide was turning against them, a new wave of Earth reinforcements dropped out of hyperspace, arriving just in time to tip the scales in humanity's favor. The reinforcements were even larger and more heavily armed than before. Massive dreadnoughts emerged from the folds of space, their guns already blazing. With their arrival, the invaders found themselves facing an even stronger and more powerful human fleet. The battle intensified once more, the invaders' hope now crushed by the sheer force of Earth's response. For hours, the two fleets fought on, each side unwilling to give an inch. The stars themselves seemed to burn with the intensity of the battle, but it was clear that the invaders were losing. Their ships were taking heavy damage, their fighters being picked off one by one, and their resolve beginning to break under the weight of humanity's overwhelming firepower. In the end, the invaders had no choice but to retreat, their forces shattered, their morale broken. They had been defeated, and humanity's warships had proven that Earth's response was far stronger than anything the invaders could have ever imagined. As the enemy ships retreated into the void of space, Brooks stood in his command center, exhausted but resolute. The battle was won, but the message was clear. Humanity would not be ignored. They would fight, and they would protect their own, no matter the cost. The galaxy had been tested, and humanity had answered with strength, firepower, and unity. And now, the invaders had learned, never underestimate the power of Earth's warships. The warships had answered the call. But what would be next? Would the invaders regroup, or had they learned their lesson? Only time would tell. The battle was over, but the dust of war still hung heavy in the air, as if the very fabric of space trembled from the chaos. Humanity's fleet had successfully driven the invaders back, but there was no time to rest. The aftermath of such a fierce battle was never simple, and there was much work to be done. Admiral Brooks stood on the command deck of the flagship, surveying the damage. His fleet had fought bravely, but many ships were in no condition to fight again. The battle had taken its toll: hull breaches, crippled engines, weapons systems knocked offline. Even the pride of humanity's fleet, the dreadnought Vanguard, had sustained significant damage. The ship's towering form now looked like a shadow of its former self. The damage was extensive, but the crew was alive. That, Brooks knew, was the most important part. They had held their ground, defied the invaders, and proven that humanity was not to be trifled with. But now, the real work began: repairs, regrouping, and preparing for whatever might come next. "Admiral, we've lost contact with several ships in the outer perimeter," reported Lieutenant Daniels, standing at the communications console, his voice tense. "They've gone dark. We can't raise them." Brooks' expression darkened. It wasn't unusual to lose contact in the heat of battle, but it was unsettling nonetheless. Send a recon team to investigate. We need to know if there are any survivors. As Daniels relayed the orders, Brooks turned his attention to the larger issue at hand. The invaders had retreated, but their defeat would not mean the end of the war. They would regroup, learn from their mistakes, and return with more powerful forces. Brooks knew this wasn't over. It was only the beginning of a long and uncertain conflict. "Admiral, we've got incoming messages from the Council," Captain Harris said, her voice breaking through his thoughts. "They want a debriefing. They're already discussing their next move." Brooks didn't need to be told what that would entail. The Earth Council had been waiting for this moment, the moment they had proven their might. They would want answers, strategies, and assurances, but Brooks couldn't provide them all. Not yet. "Tell them I'll be there shortly," Brooks replied, his voice heavy with exhaustion. "I'll need time to assess the full extent of the damage before I can offer anything concrete." He stood by the viewport, watching as the vast expanse of space stretched out before him. For a brief moment, he let his mind wander, thinking of his home planet, Earth, the people who were counting on him, on all of them, to bring peace. The memory of their faces fueled him. It reminded him why they fought. But even in victory, the galaxy remained a dangerous place. The invaders had only retreated, not surrendered. What they had seen today would surely drive them to come back with greater force, and humanity would need to be ready. The commotion on the bridge continued as the crew scrambled to assess the situation, but Brooks couldn't shake the nagging feeling that this victory had come at a cost. What had they lost in the fight? What would the galaxy think now that Earth had shown its strength? Would they see humanity as a true power, or would they be seen as a threat to be eliminated? Brooks' thoughts were interrupted when the recon team returned. They had managed to locate the missing ships and reported that some had been heavily damaged, but were still operational. Others had suffered catastrophic damage, but thankfully no lives were lost. The Admiral exhaled deeply, feeling a weight lift off his shoulders. The crew had been lucky. They had fought hard and survived. But now they had to face the reality of the war. There was no time to celebrate the victory, not when so much was still uncertain. Soon after, the Council's debriefing began. Brooks sat in the conference room, surrounded by officials and military leaders, each eager to hear about the outcome of the battle. The room was filled with tense murmurs as they waited for him to speak. Brooks had always been known for his calm demeanor in the face of chaos. But today, even he couldn't fully mask the exhaustion he felt. "Admiral, the galaxy is watching us," the Council's lead representative, Ambassador Zarek, began, his voice measured and calculating. "What is our next move?" Brooks took a moment before answering. "We continue the fight," he said, his voice firm. "The invaders have retreated, but they'll be back. We need to prepare for their return, and we need to be ready to strike before they can regroup." The room was silent for a moment. Some members exchanged looks of concern, while others nodded in agreement. This was not the answer they had expected, but it was the one they needed. "Our fleet needs to be rebuilt, and we need to strengthen our position," Brooks continued. "We've shown them what we can do, but we need to ensure they never think we're weak again." Ambassador Zarek leaned forward, his eyes sharp. "And what of our allies? Have we made the right impression?" Brooks met his gaze. "We've made an impression, but it's not enough. We need more support, more firepower, and we need it fast." The Council's deliberations were long and intense, but Brooks had already made his decision. Humanity was no longer a passive participant in the galaxy. They were a force to be reckoned with, and it was time for the galaxy to understand that. As the meeting broke up and the members went their separate ways, Brooks stood up, his resolve strengthening with each passing moment. There was no turning back now. The invaders had made a mistake coming to Earth, and now humanity had shown them what they could do. But the real question remained: would humanity's strength be enough to hold the galaxy's enemies at bay? The war was far from over, and in the coming days, Brooks knew that the future of Earth and its people would be tested in ways they could never imagine. The peace humanity had fought for might be further away than ever. Days passed, and the war raged on. The fleet had been busy repairing the damage done during the battle, but Admiral Brooks knew that every moment they spent in recovery was another moment their enemies could use to regroup. Earth's military might was strong, but the invaders had proven that they could strike with overwhelming force. The Council had authorized a series of deep space reconnaissance missions, hoping to uncover the movements of the enemy fleet. The intelligence they had gathered so far had suggested that the invaders were licking their wounds, waiting to launch another attack. But what nobody had expected was a strike from an unexpected direction. Admiral Brooks was standing on the bridge of the Vanguard, staring out into the vastness of space, when the alarm rang out, slicing through the quiet. "Admiral, we've detected a massive fleet signature. It's coming from the outer rim." Lieutenant Daniel's voice rang out, frantic. It's them. The invaders." Brooks spun around, his face hardening. "What do you mean, it's them? We've been monitoring their location. This fleet wasn't supposed to be this close." "Sir, they must have been hiding, waiting to strike when we were vulnerable," Daniels responded, voice shaking with disbelief. "They've moved in fast. The fleet is massive. They've come from the direction we least expected." The Vanguard sensors confirmed it. An enemy armada was barreling toward Earth, faster than anticipated. This time, they weren't merely looking to conquer. They were intent on annihilation. The fleet's size dwarfed anything they had faced before, and it became clear that the invaders had learned from their past mistakes. Admiral Brooks' heart pounded in his chest. This was the moment they had been dreading. The invaders had returned with more ships, more firepower, and they had chosen the time when Earth's fleet was still recovering from its previous battle. "Ready the fleet for battle," Brooks ordered. "We fight now, or we risk losing everything." The crew rushed to action, and within moments, the Vanguard was surrounded by Earth's warships, each ready to engage in a battle that would determine the fate of the planet. As the enemy fleet drew closer, Brooks' mind raced. They had no choice but to fight. There was no room for negotiation, no time for reinforcements. This was a do-or-die situation. The Vanguard had to be the spearhead of Earth's defense, but even the Dreadnought, with all its power, could not stand alone against an enemy this strong. "We can't take them head-on, not with this many ships," Captain Harris said, her voice tight with urgency. "We need to outmaneuver them. Use our speed. We know their fleet. We know their tactics. We can still win, but we'll have to be smarter." Brooks nodded grimly, agreeing with his captain. "We'll have to hit them hard and fast, and we'll need every ship to do it. Prepare the assault fleet. I want every ship ready to launch the moment we engage." The enemy fleet came closer, their massive warships cutting through the stars like shadows. Brooks could feel the tension rising on the bridge, every crew member silently bracing for the conflict to come. There was no room for fear now, only action. "Sir, the first wave of enemy ships is in firing range," Daniels warned. Brooks took a deep breath, steadying himself. He knew this moment would define everything. He glanced at Captain Harris, who gave him a determined nod. There was no turning back now. "Fire," Brooks commanded. The battle began. A blinding series of flashes erupted as Earth's warships unleashed a devastating barrage of energy and missiles. The enemy fleet retaliated almost instantly, a wall of fire streaking through the void of space. Explosions rocked the Vanguard, but the ship held firm, its shields absorbing most of the incoming fire. Other ships in Earth's fleet weren't so lucky, taking heavy damage as the invaders attacked with ruthless precision. The Vanguard surged forward, its massive guns firing in quick succession. The first enemy ship in their path shattered into pieces as the Vanguard's weapons tore through its hull. Brooks couldn't afford to slow down. Every second was crucial. But despite their fierce resistance, the enemy fleet outnumbered Earth's ships, and they were relentless. It became clear that Earth's forces were being pushed back, cornered by the sheer force of the invaders' might. Admiral Brooks fought to maintain control, barking orders over the chaos as the battle escalated. "We need to regroup now," Brooks shouted. "Fall back to the third quadrant. Use the asteroid field for cover." His crew scrambled to execute the command, but the invaders were quick to adapt. They followed Earth's fleet, not giving them a moment to breathe. In the midst of the battle, Lieutenant Daniels spotted something on the radar. "Sir, we've got another enemy fleet coming in from the other side of the sector. They're flanking us." Brooks' heart sank. They were being encircled on all sides. "Divert all power to shields," Brooks ordered, his voice sharp with urgency. "Prepare the emergency jump. We're pulling out. If we don't make it out now, we'll lose everything." But it was already too late. The enemy fleet had them trapped, and no amount of firepower or tactics could change the inevitable. A sudden barrage of enemy fire hit the Vanguard, causing the ship to shudder violently. Sparks flew from consoles as the crew scrambled to maintain control. "We're losing shields, sir," Harris reported, her voice tight. "We can't hold them off for much longer." Brooks clenched his fists. The fight wasn't over, but they had no choice now. Their only hope was to survive long enough to make a strategic retreat and regroup for another battle. "We can't let them win," Brooks muttered under his breath. He knew the road ahead would be long and treacherous, but if Earth was to survive, they had to push through this darkest hour. The Vanguard and the rest of Earth's fleet were trapped in the heart of the battle. The enemy's overwhelming numbers were closing in, their firepower relentless, while Earth's ships, battered and struggling, fought to stay alive. The bridge of the Vanguard was a scene of chaos. Crew members shouted orders, monitoring screens flashing warning signs of imminent destruction. Admiral Brooks stood at the center of it all, trying to maintain a sense of control. He could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on him. Earth was facing its greatest threat yet. The odds were stacked against them. Yet, something deep inside him refused to accept that this was the end. "Admiral, we're down to 30% shield power," Lieutenant Daniels reported, her voice shaking. "We won't last long at this rate." Brooks turned to face her, his eyes hardening with determination. "We hold the line. We fought too long and too hard to give up now." "Sir, the enemy is closing in," Captain Harris said, her voice steady despite the situation. "We're being flanked on both sides." Brooks' mind raced. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and surrounded. If they didn't act quickly, the Vanguard would be lost. But then he remembered the one thing they still had: human ingenuity and determination. The enemy had underestimated them before, and it was time to turn the tables. "Set course for the asteroid field," he ordered. "We'll use it to break their formation. It's our only chance to escape this trap." The crew moved swiftly to execute the plan. The Vanguard's engines roared to life as it turned toward the field of asteroids ahead. The invaders' ships hesitated for a moment, not expecting the Earth fleet to make such a bold move. This was their moment to strike. "We'll use the asteroids as cover," Brooks explained to his officers. "Once we break free, we'll take down their lead ship. We destroy their command ship, and the rest will fall apart. They'll have no leadership." As the Vanguard darted toward the field of asteroids, the enemy fleet followed, trying to maintain their formation. Earth's ships darted in and out of the asteroids, evading enemy fire. The rocks provided much-needed cover, but they also made it difficult for Earth's ships to maneuver effectively. Still, the fleet pressed on, pushing forward with the determination of people fighting for their survival. Suddenly, a massive explosion rang out as an enemy ship collided with an asteroid. The invaders' ships were not as nimble in the rocky field, and one by one, they began to crash into the obstacles, their massive forms getting tangled in the debris. "It's working," Lieutenant Daniels shouted, relief creeping into her voice. "The enemy is losing control." Brooks didn't let himself relax, though. the battle wasn't won yet. They still had to strike at the heart of the invaders' fleet. "Prepare to target their command ship," Brooks commanded. "That's the key to victory. All ships, concentrate fire on the flagship." The Earth fleet regrouped in the midst of the chaos, focusing their firepower on the massive command ship. It was the size of a small moon, heavily armored, and protected by a swarm of smaller ships. But with the enemy's attention split between the destruction around them and the relentless assault from Earth's warships, the invaders couldn't defend it fast enough. One by one, Earth's warships fired devastating blasts, targeting weak spots in the flagship's shields. It was a risky strategy, but it was their only shot at victory. "We've breached the flagship's shields," Captain Harris yelled. "They're vulnerable." Brooks tightened his grip on the command chair. This was it. The Vanguard's massive weapons roared, launching everything they had at the flagship. The first blast shook the command ship, and then a second hit. The flagship's shields faltered, and the ship itself seemed to shudder under the assault. "Keep firing," Brooks barked. "Do not let up." The atmosphere on the bridge was tense. Every crew member was on edge, knowing that this final strike could mean the end or the beginning of their survival. Then, with a deafening explosion, the flagship's core exploded in a blaze of fire and light. The shockwave sent a ripple through the surrounding ships, throwing them into disarray. The enemy fleet was thrown into chaos. The loss of their flagship was catastrophic. Without leadership, the invaders were no longer able to coordinate their attacks. Earth's warships took advantage of the confusion, pressing the advantage and destroying enemy ships one after another. The tide of the battle was turning. Brooks watched as the remaining invader ships began to retreat, no longer able to withstand the concentrated fire of Earth's fleet. The remnants of their armada scattered, and the remaining ships fled into the void, their once unified forces now shattered. The battle wasn't over, but the worst was behind them. "Sir, the enemy is retreating," Lieutenant Daniels said, her voice filled with disbelief. "We've done it. We've won." Admiral Brooks allowed himself a moment of quiet relief. The Earth fleet had held its ground. Against all odds, they had fought back and turned the tide of the war. But he knew this was just one victory. The galaxy would never be the same, and the battle for Earth's survival was far from over. "We've won this battle," Brooks said, his voice firm. "But this war is not over yet. Prepare for the next fight. We've shown the galaxy what humanity is capable of, and we won't stop fighting until the galaxy knows they made the wrong choice." Earth had proven its might. The galaxy had learned its lesson. Humanity was not weak. It was powerful, relentless, and capable of facing any challenge, no matter how impossible. The victory was hard-won, but it was undeniable. As the remnants of the enemy fleet limped away, the Earth fleet stood victorious in the void of space. The war had been long and brutal, but the courage and resilience of humanity had proven stronger than any threat the galaxy could throw at them. On Earth, the news spread like wildfire. The victory was celebrated, but it wasn't a time for complacency. The leaders of Earth knew that the galaxy had witnessed humanity's strength. They also understood that this war was just the beginning. The universe would never forget the day Earth had fought back. Admiral Brooks stood on the command deck of the Vanguard, staring out into the vast emptiness of space. The stars twinkled in the distance, but they held a new meaning now. They were no longer symbols of endless wonder. They were reminders of the battles fought, the lives lost, and the future humanity would now have to shape. "This is just the beginning, isn't it?" Captain Harris asked quietly, stepping up beside him. She, too, was looking out at the stars, her face solemn. Brooks nodded. "Yes, but we've proven something important today. We've shown the galaxy that humanity isn't to be underestimated. The enemy thought they could crush us, but they were wrong. We've proven we're capable of so much more." He paused, his thoughts drifting to the countless sacrifices that had been made. The brave men and women who had given their lives to defend Earth's freedom. Their faces were burned into his memory. We'll have to rebuild, he continued. There's still a long road ahead, but Earth's fleet will lead the way. We've gained something powerful here, a reputation, respect. And with that, we'll secure our place in the galaxy. Back on Earth, the news reports of the victory were filled with images of cheering crowds, waving banners, and signs that read, "Earth stands strong." But while the celebrations were well-deserved, Brooks knew that the real work was just beginning. "Sir, we've received a transmission from the Federation," Lieutenant Daniel said, breaking his reverie. "It's a request for a meeting with the leaders of Earth. They want to discuss the aftermath of the battle." Brooks turned toward her, his face unreadable. "Put it through." The screen flickered to life, and the faces of several alien leaders appeared on the screen. Their expressions were stern, though there was an unmistakable respect in their eyes. These were the same leaders who had once thought Earth weak, the same ones who had believed humanity was just another primitive species in the vastness of space. "Admiral Brooks," one of the leaders said, his tone formal, "we come to you in the wake of your victory. The galaxy has seen what humanity is capable of. The Federation acknowledges the strength of your fleet and your people. We now extend a hand of peace, as equals." Brooks studied the leader's face for a moment before replying. "It's good to see you've come to your senses. Humanity never sought war, but we will never back down when our survival is at stake. If the galaxy wants peace, it will have to respect Earth's place in it." Another leader, this one from a race that had once scoffed at humanity's abilities, spoke up. "We were wrong. You are not weak, as we once thought. Earth's fleet has proven itself to be a force that cannot be ignored. We would like to open diplomatic talks to create a future where Earth can thrive alongside the galaxy's most powerful nations." Brooks' eyes narrowed. The galaxy had underestimated Earth, and now they were acknowledging the power that humanity held. It was a turning point. A new chapter in history was beginning. "I'm listening," Brooks said, his voice calm yet firm. "But know this, Earth will not be treated as a pawn. If we are to coexist in this galaxy, it will be on equal terms. Humanity won't bend to anyone." The leaders on the screen nodded, a mixture of respect and understanding in their eyes. They knew the stakes now. Earth was not the weak, helpless planet they had once thought it to be. Humanity had shown its might and its resolve. The meeting ended, and Brooks stood quietly for a moment, taking it all in. The war had changed everything. The galaxy would never see Earth the same way again. Humanity had earned its place, not through diplomacy or appeasement, but through firepower, grit, and a refusal to surrender. "We've proven ourselves," Captain Harris said, breaking the silence. "Now we rebuild, and we make sure the galaxy knows we're not just survivors. We're conquerors." Brooks looked out into space once more. The stars seemed closer now, more inviting. But they also held a certain weight. Earth had earned its place in the galaxy, and the future was uncertain, but humanity was ready for whatever came next. "Let them remember this," Brooks said quietly. "Let them remember what happens when humanity is pushed too far. The galaxy might have thought Earth was weak, but now it knows better." As Earth's fleet continued to patrol the stars, protecting their world and exploring new territories, one thing was certain: humanity's place in the galaxy was secure. No longer would they be looked down upon or underestimated. They had earned the right to stand among the stars, and they would fight to keep it. The story of humanity's rise from the brink of destruction had only just begun. The galaxy was vast, and there were many challenges ahead, but Earth had proven one thing: when pushed to the edge, humanity would always rise to the occasion. The future was bright, and the galaxy would remember the day when humanity answered with firepower, changing everything forever.